Hi, I'm Issie Barratt and I'm the Artistic Director of the National Youth Jazz Collective. Welcome to our hashtag National Youth Jazz Wednesdays. Yes, we're back. We started last week. We're here now right through till the Christmas break, every Wednesday at 6 o'clock, having fantastic, stimulating conversations, not just jazz specific, but about music and where jazz sits in the realms of that, and particularly improvisation and composition. So before I welcome our dear guests, I just want to make sure everything's okay. Yeah, we're all on. We had a little technical problem a couple of seconds ago. So the premise of today's conversation is all about the fact that people presume, especially young people and some of the teachers that we've worked with who are not so familiar with the idiom, automatically presume that because we're the National Youth Jazz Collective, we only work with what I call jazz-specific instruments. And so that's seen as things like saxophones, trumpets, trombones, guitar, bass, drums, sometimes things like banjo, but it's a very specific instrumentation. We work with everybody. And I always have, even before NYJC, all the music that I write and the sound world that I'm in as a composer and a performer has always been very diverse instrumentally. And when we talk about diversity, we rarely talk about instrumentation. So today I'm really thrilled to welcome our first guest, Mr. Jim Rattigan, who's going to talk to us a bit about what it's like to not be in the centre field and yet to be in the centre field. Hi, Jim. How are you doing?
Very well. Thank you very much, Izzy. Nice to see you.
Lovely to see you. And we've worked with each other in many different guises, which I'm sure will come out of the conversation, both sort of as performers and educators, and also curators of projects as well. So first of all, I think it would be lovely to introduce yourself as an instrumentalist. So Jim, what do you play?
I play the horn.
The French horn. Sorry that it suddenly disappeared for 2 seconds. So the French horn, beautiful instrument.
French horn.
And in what sort of environments do you play French horn? Because it's not what we might think is just the conventional way. You've done all sorts of different types of music. So might you sort of talk a bit about your performing career?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, I started, actually I played a French horn, but I started a piano accordion player as a kid. In fact, I started life as an Irish dancer.
Ooh!
Not many people know that. But I started life as an Irish dancer. I did. I had Irish parents, so that was my first thing. And then I started playing a piano accordion. And then really I took up an orchestral instrument because the accordion in those days wasn't accepted in music colleges and things like that. Because it wasn't free bass, you see.
Okay. Oh, yeah. Could you explain a little bit, like a couple of sentences, what you mean by that? Because I don't think
the accordions, you hear a lot of French music. So cha-cha, you know, that because the chord lead up on the left hand. So you have the fundamental, so it goes up in fifths, down in fourths. So C, G, D, A, and then the second row is a major chord, then a minor chord, then a seventh chord, and a diminished chord. So the chords are made up. So it's very hard to do sort of bark with your left hand because you're flying. Bass was introduced, so it's chromatic. All about chromatic.
And you weren't playing the chromatic?
No. I mean, I thought about doing it and I realized that it would take an awful amount of work, tons, you know, complete dedication. And I wasn't that into it. And I think it's very important that you do something that you really, really naturally want to get out of bed and start practicing, you know. And
but within the context of Irish dancing, the instrument was, that's what its purpose was for, was to create those sort of backings. So in that context, did you enjoy playing the accordion in the sort of the Irish dance world?
In fact, well, actually, I didn't play it in the Irish. I didn't play Irish music.
Oh, brilliant. I love this. This is getting wackier and wackier.
I started as an Irish dancer, but my mother played for us while we danced. We danced as a family. And then we started playing the accordion, but we played classical music, specially written for the accordion.
Such as?
Ivor Bainham wrote pieces, people like that. So you'd literally have pieces written for the accordion and then you'd compete. Unfortunately, that was the downside. Because that's not really, in my book, that's not really a great way to play music, competing. It's not.
And I work with Karen Street a lot, and she mentioned that when she was doing a similar type of thing, growing up as a teenager, that there were, because that was in Burton-on-Trent, there were big accordion orchestras. Was that the same where you were?
Yeah. In fact, our paths crossed with her brother. My sister and I did the duet, and they did a duet.
Oh.
Kevin, her brother. So
yeah.
So our paths.
How old were you when you met in that? How old were you when you were doing that type of playing?
Oh, I was very young, 11, 12,
Wow.
like that, 13 maybe.
Brilliant.
Then I packed it in at 16 and took up the French horn. I really got into the French horn.
And was there a crossover, or was it just that, right, I'm putting that in his box, now I'm going to do the French horn?
Yeah, just pretty much. I mean, wow. I always played piano a bit. I love playing the piano for my own enjoyment. So the piano was a constant, but the accordion took a sort of back seat, if you like. And I didn't really play it. See.
And what was it about the French horn that grabbed your attention? Why?
I don't really know. I mean, I started off playing the trumpet, and we had a school band, and the school band was terrible. It was a terrible band. It was really bad. I mean, if you forgot your PE kit, you had to go and listen to the school band for 20 minutes.
There's a bit of a theme here, though, that the social side of things seems to be really important to you. In all those different instruments, it had a social engagement.
Yeah, it was great. It was the Irish dance. The trouble with the Irish dancing and the piano accordion was very competitive based, competition based. We did gigs on a Saturday. I'm from Luton. We did all the clubs in Luton on Saturdays. So we did that as kids, but the overriding thing was to win medals, loads of cups and pots and pans. And I wasn't really into that. No, I was more creative. I wanted to be creative and just enjoy music more. So when I started playing in the school band, even though it was terrible, I just loved the way everyone was playing together. I loved that. I really did enjoy that side of it. You know, I still do.
And I think one of the things that people might not be aware of about the competitive side of things, it's kind of obvious once you're involved in it or even think about it, but is that the repertoire is very often limited because it's competition pieces that you're playing. So there isn't that freedom to sort of go off and enter the competition with any piece that you want to play. Often it's a set, like doing exams, it's a set pieces.
Yeah, I mean, while I was doing it, that's the trouble. You'd learn pieces, you learn a set piece, and then you'd learn a choice piece, and you do the competition, win or lose, then you go on to the next one. So you'd have to, that would take it back, that tune, that's music's gone, you learn to the next. Mm. But they started a thing called modern rhythm section. And now I thought this, and you had to pick a tune. And I had Blue Skies, I think. Who wrote Blue Skies? Anyway, I chose Blue Skies, and you had to change it. You had to do something with it. You had to improvise around. So you had to turn it into your own piece. You had to play the tune, and then you had to do lots of different improvising and change. And I thought, this is it. This is great. This is my thing.
And was that the first time that you'd really kind of rolled your sleeves up and got stuck into improvisation? Had you been dabbling with it already, or?
Well, I think I had without realising it, because sometimes I got lost in what I was supposed to be playing, so I just make it up anyway. So
I've heard that from various people, and I think that is the sign of the early. It's a strategy, isn't it, to begin with?
I used to play the piano, and I used to be playing away, and my teacher said, "That's very nice, but you weren't reading the music, were you?" I said, "No, I couldn't really follow it." So just making it up, which should be and that should be really encouraged.
Definitely, it's very much missing from the activities that the youngsters are engaged in, and they comment on that a lot when we do the evaluation process of any project that we're involved in. It's like, how does this compare to what you're doing on a regular basis? And it's that engagement with improvisation that they really crave, for the rest of the academic year. So there you are, learning picking up the French horn, and you've also started to dabble and do very well at improvisation because you've been doing it in some of the competitions on the accordion. So how at 16 playing the French horn did you get from there to being principal French horn in a symphony orchestra?
Well, yeah, I mean that's quite a journey. Yeah, yeah. I mean, I couldn't really play the horn when I was 16, to be honest, to be fair. I learned from a book because there wasn't a teacher, French horn. The only reason I took up the horn really was because I saw this funny shaped thing on the floor and I said, "What's that?" And he says, "French horn. Do you want to play it?" I said, "Yeah." But I did. I had a go and I just liked the sound. I just liked the sound it made. That's the reason it resonated. And I just liked playing one note. I just liked playing a note. And I really enjoyed the sound it made, you know, and that's what I didn't really know what I was doing, but I was enjoying the noise I was making. So, and I got into it. I just got into it and practiced.
And then 2 years later, got into college?
Then, yeah, wasn't quite as simple as that. It was hard work.
Absolutely. That's why I'm so astonished, because I'm thinking you took it up at 16, you got into conservatory and you became, and then being principal of a symphony orchestra as well. So could you tell us about that journey?
Yeah, it was quite amazing, really, because at 16, yeah, I'd start again. I'd sort of, and I got this teacher who was a professional horn teacher. I left home and went to a college in Cambridge College of Arts and Technology, which was great. So I got a teacher there who was a professional horn player. So he said he'll start me again. So we started again. So it was a great process. He had a great way of teaching. So I did that. And then at 18, I applied for colleges, but I didn't actually get in.
Well, I'm not surprised. You know, that's a very steep trajectory to have got
2 years.
Yeah. So that, you know, it doesn't surprise me.
So yeah, so I tried again the next year and scraped into Trinity. I just about got into Trinity. And I spent 3 years there and I worked very hard. I worked extremely hard. I mean, really, really practiced. I mean, I still do practice. For some reason, I haven't got a problem doing hours of practice. I don't mind it. I quite enjoy it. So I'm lucky in that way. So then I did 3 years at Trinity and then I did a year at the Academy. And the Royal Academy of Music, in those days, one of the horn teachers was principal horn of the London Philharmonic Orchestra. So I went in and I had a lesson and he said, "Yeah, I'll give you could play, I'll give you some work." And I thought nothing of it. I thought, yeah, they say that, you know, but then the next day the phone rang and that was it. I was playing with the London Philharmonic for pretty much full time, you know, and I hadn't done a month at the Academy. I mean, it was a shock.
And how long? Because I know you really well, and so I know we've talked about different sort of key points, and you know, I've been around and we've talked about it and seen it, but I think for the story to piece it together, you then played in symphony orchestras. I think you did some work in opera as well?
Yeah, everything.
So
yeah,
you're really right in the heart of excellence, and you know, beautifully crafted music, beautifully played, you know, to large audiences. So that you were living the dream.
Very much.
Did you feel like you were living the dream?
Unfortunately, I think it's very important. If I could look back now, I wish that I'd been more prepared. I think there's a great scheme now where in orchestras, when you're in your last year of college, I don't know what they call it, side by side or something. So you might be sitting there in the Philharmonia playing away professionally, and there's a student sitting next to you who's in their last year of college, they're just there for the rehearsal and they're playing your part with you, you know, just for one of the rehearsals, because the big shock is sitting in an orchestra I did youth orchestras, I did the European youth orchestra, things like that. But the change from that to professional is a completely different planet. And I think that side by side thing is a really great thing because it is a shock. You know, the volume, the sheer power. You know, at the first rehearsal, it was An Heldenleben by Richard Strauss I had to do. And I tried to keep up with these other 7 French horn players. I was sitting on the end and my lip gone after 10 minutes. trying to keep up with this volume, and they kept it up all day.
Wow.
And then when it was quiet playing, you could hardly hear it. The level, the dynamic level range was, so it was, I wish I was more prepared that I could have enjoyed it more at that age. But I was really just terrified most of the time.
And where was jazz during that? Were you an avid jazz listener, or did you go to gigs, audience?
Yeah. I loved jazz. I mean, I played a little bit of piano. I was an Oscar Peterson fan.
Oh yeah. I
mean, really massive. Got all his records. Used to go down to HMV in Oxford Street, and they were selling off these. There was always an album for £1. We get requests, something like that, sort of for £1. And I go home and play. So I loved Oscar Peterson, and I listened to mostly Oscar Peterson, Weather Report. But jazz to me was something, and I played the piano for my own enjoyment. I wouldn't dream of playing it in public, but I played it for my own enjoyment. And for me, jazz was a personal, something I could just enjoy. I think with the classical music, playing at that level, at that age, it was huge amount of pressure, you have to be perfect all the time. And that's a lot of pressure. So
huge.
Yeah. So to me was something personal that I just kept to myself, and just did it for my own, really just for myself,
And that's interesting that you raised that, because I know quite a few musicians who do something else aside from what they are publicly known as. They do something else in music, and when people get wind of the fact they do this something else, they protect it, and they don't actually want to do it professionally because the other side is so intense. They want to keep it for themselves, and it was quite a while until we all knew that you were wanting to play jazz. I'm wondering, was that going on for you? Was there that thing with, I'm doing this now for me, and then I'm going out to play in public on the French horn? Were you shy about volunteering your playing of jazz, or once you got to a certain level, did you think, right, that's it, now I'm going to start inviting other people to come and play with me?
It wasn't quite right like that. With the French horn, I reached the stage. I'd done a lot of the orchestras, and I'd done, as you say, opera, lots of films, tons of film work. I played every type of music, pop music, everything. And I just got this thing about jazz on the French horn. I wasn't sure it worked, to be honest. I wasn't sure, but for some reason I wanted to find out if it could, in the way I played it, with an orchestral sound.
Yeah.
That orchestral sound I want to do on the French horn. So really it was like, okay, I'll give it, I'll take the leap and start trying to do it.
So what did that involve?
In what way?
So how did you start that journey of taking that leap? What was the first thing that you did as you leapt?
Well, the first thing I did was I went on a summer school in Porthcawl, I think it was, in Wales, with Simon Purcell ran, something like that. Porthcawl, was it?
Oh no, I know which one you mean. Yeah.
I went on one of those. I didn't go as a horn player though. I just went to learn. I didn't bring my French horn. I just went to learn about jazz, because even though I was copying Oscar Peterson on the piano, I didn't know what I was doing. I didn't know I was flat 9 or sharp 11 or anything. I was just playing by ear again, which is great. So I went there to learn and got some basics, and then had a few basic lessons off certain people, and then started to try and work at it myself. And then I joined Hans Coller's band.
Oh, okay. Was it Glamorgan? Is that the summer school you were trying to remember?
No, it was in what?
Yeah, Glamorgan.
Could have been. Yeah.
With Dave Wickens and...
Yes.
Yeah.
Glamorgan.
Yeah.
Right, learned a lot there.
Yeah, it's got a very... and it did move, I think, to Trinity for a little while, and now it's elsewhere. Maybe in a minute when we bring Martin on, he might be able to remind us where it's moved to, because it's still going on. I think, well, at least it was. Not much is going on because of being online at the minute, but... So fast forward to... Because you, with that Oscar Peterson... loving of Oscar Peterson, was it that sort of sound world that you wanted to play jazz in, or were you open to all sorts of different areas of jazz? Were you focusing on sort of bebop and
no. I mean, the amazing thing was, I mean, I started to learn really basic things like the modes, things I didn't know anything like that. I just really just played for fun. I didn't know what I was doing, so I really did sort of like learn things on a practical level. But I joined Hans's band because the French horn player left, and Sarah Homer said, "Oh, I know this French horn player who would like to play." So I joined, but I really didn't. Again, I didn't really know what I was doing. So Hans would say, "We want you to improvise," and I said, "Well, I don't really. No, just improvise." So I really just improvised again, not really knowing. So I was again in the deep end, a bit like the orchestral world. You know, all of a sudden I found myself doing it. I mean, it was really like that, and you know, trying to hold on one finger on the raft. You know, try not to drown. You know. And it was.
How did it feel? Was it exciting? Was it thrilling?
It was totally thrilling, and the music was so new.
Yeah.
A new sound. It was a new approach to music, as having played orchestral music. It was absolutely life-changing, to be honest. It was fascinating, and it was just wonderful. And I'd improvise. I didn't know what I was doing, and people would ask, "Yeah, really like that," you know. And I think, I'll keep doing it then, you know. So and then in the meantime, I was trying to learn bebop and things like that, because this was not bebop changes. This wasn't changes as such like that. So in the meantime, I was going home and then trying to learn. So I was doing them both at the same time. But I was using really what I was learning at home to do what I was doing. This was freer, much freer. You know.
And what was really lovely was being around during that time and seeing, you know, catching up with you once a year or every 2 years or something, and you know, really seeing this journey. So you know, suddenly there was it a quartet or a quintet, and then there was a big band, and then you were writing your own pieces. So now when people mention your name, it's just you're automatically seen as one of the leading sort of band leaders, composers on the scene. So how did that all come together, so that you went from being in Hans's group, being at home doing the bebop sort of shedding and and then also doing some composition? How did that gradually how did you end up where you are now?
Well, I've always written music, even as a kid. I used to get bands together as a kid. You know, might be an accordion and a flute and a recorder, but I'd always try and get people together. It was only in that orchestral time I did the orchestral, where the thing about orchestral playing, it's like a life. It's not like a job. It's a life. It's a way of life. You're on tour for 7-8 months a year. You know, you're hardly at home. It's a way of life. So when I left it, then I realised. Now I started playing with all these hands and that, and then he actually suggested, "Why don't you write some tunes yourself?" You know, and it was then that it came back. But it was inspired. My writing was inspired by playing with these people. You were itching to get home and write your own tunes. So it was by playing with these people that I admired, these bands that with people that I really admired, you were inspired to write your own tunes from that.
Equally, while all of that was going on, you probably don't realise, but you yourself were a big inspiration, because the fact that there was no set time for which your journey was going to have to hit the final destination. And for all of us sort of who'd come to jazz quite late on, because there were no jazz courses for any of us to go to. So we were all piecing things together and learning on the bandstand and learning from each other. So your journey was actually a really inspirational journey for a lot of us. And I know that a lot of the people who were inspired have also played now in your projects. I wonder, before we bring our second guest on, whether you might just explain what Strong Tea is all about.
What, the actual album or the tune or the band?
What is Strong Tea? I mean, I know
I just love tea. I just love drinking tea, especially Irish breakfast. So I just love tea. I mean, and the stronger the better. I drink far too much tea. So yeah, but the writing wise, that tune is based on rhythm changes, that actual tune. But the middle section, I play, because I've done a lot of film music, so I try to play the horn. There's a little horn solo. So I play it in an orchestral way that you would play on a film. It's a theme, you know, like, so what I try and do is not discard everything I've done.
Yeah. Bring
it to the music. But it's interesting you say about the time, where you're going. I don't feel like there's any end.
No.
You know, I'm learning every single day, especially in lockdown. I do loads of practice. So I'm learning every day and finding new things every day. I can't wait to get another tune out and start getting a band together again, because I've got a great idea. You know, I don't think it will ever end. It only end when I cop it. You know, that's it. That's the end, you know.
But I think because we were all of us, including Martin, who's going to come and join us in a couple of minutes, we were instrumental in sort of getting the conservatoire side of things up and running, and now NYJC. So, you know, for sometimes there is a sense of the fact that there is this sort of line, there is this graduation, there is this curriculum, that it's now contextualized a lot more, you know. And I think that's a really great thing to remind for us each to remind ourselves, is that there is no final destination, and not to focus on the final destination, but to enjoy the journey. That just like it's part of being with groups of people, the social side is very important. Who you choose to play with is really important within the instrumentation. It's really important to enjoy the moment as well, and the music is of the moment. You know, as a dear friend of ours said, Graham Collier, jazz happens in real time once. And so I'm wondering now if we might, whether we might welcome our second guest. And I'm wondering, as Martin joins us, were the two of you at Trinity together?
I'm going to come in.
Oh, come in, Martin.
Hello.
Yeah, we were. Hi, we were there together, weren't we, Jim? And but we weren't close then. I just think we just knew each other. I don't think we ever played together. I don't remember really, but we're roughly the same age. Did we play together?
We did once. We did pictures at an exhibition. I was sitting in the orchestra and you came and did the alto solo, and it was fantastic. And I loved your sound. I absolutely loved your sound. It made a fantastic sound. And I thought, wow, I used to go to your gigs after that. I thought,
wow, God, I remember doing that. I was petrified. It's that thing of, it's only in one movement, isn't it? That's the saxophone. Yeah.
So I'm wondering if the two of you might just capture, because it was really lovely when I was head of jazz in 1999 at Trinity, setting the course up, inviting you all to come and work and teach on it, and then bit by bit hearing that you'd already got relationships with the college that were, you know, were before we'd set the jazz course up, by having been students there, and hearing about the way that you had all collectively sort of studied jazz and looked at jazz together. I wonder, Martin, might you tell us how, when you were at Trinity, because there was no jazz as part of the curriculum.
No.
So how were you within Trinity? How were you sort of in a more informal way looking at jazz together?
You know what helped a lot then, I think, was Simon Purcell, who Jim's mentioned already. But Simon's always had this drive to play, but also in some ways a bigger drive to teach the music and talk about it to everyone. And even then, which is a purely classical, quite conservative type of college, really, he started a jazz society up. You know, the student union could start different societies up, and he started a jazz one up, which was actually quite radical at the time, I think, wasn't it? It was seen as a radical thing to do. So I've always learned a lot from Simon, I think, in the sense of, not that he was fully formed then about practicing either, actually, but in the sense of getting a discipline, a kind of self-discipline about practicing and doing it every day. I think that's one of the things I learned from him. And we started playing together. And I remember how we had this regular pub gig for £7 each a week in Knightsbridge. And it was really useful, but I had no idea how to practice jazz at all. One thing that was similar to Jim's story, which was great to hear, and I've heard a lot of that before because Jim and I are close and we played together a lot, and I've asked him about his background, but there's some things I didn't remember. And I also started playing at 16, but I didn't play anything before that. And so I scraped into Trinity because the teacher, Chris Gradwell, wanted a saxophone student. He was teaching clarinet there, but didn't really have any saxophone students. So I didn't have to compete against any other saxophone players. if I was playing violin, there's no way I would have got in. You know, there'd be 20 violin players applying. So that was lucky for me in one sense. And I also, like Jim, I did loads of practice then, probably more than I've done since, really, but totally classical. I was playing all the French, Marcel Mule, all of these classical books. I was doing an hour of long notes from 9 to 10 every morning, and all this repertoire, you know, and I played the Paul Creston sonatas, and I knew nothing about this music, really. I was very immature musically in terms of classical music. I love it all now, but I had no idea. I was just playing this repertoire. And then Simon and I would get this band together and we'd go and do a gig, and I thought I could play jazz. And that was completely mistaken and hopeless. And actually 4 years of that kind of background was very useful for me for the instrumental playing and experience of playing in saxophone quartet and doing all these sonatas and all this technical stuff. But for jazz, it was hopeless. And it was only after I left, and I did 4 years there actually, after I left, even two years after I left, I started realizing I had to practice things in all keys, for instance, or learn things from memory rather than reading a standard and writing it out right in the quartet. So yeah. I'm a very late developer, really late developer. And that, as you mentioned earlier, for me, the colleges, which are great, it's a double-edged sword, of course, all these the jazz in colleges, trying to fit into these institutions. But one thing I think it does do, it gets people there a little bit earlier than my generation. On the other hand, the beauty of being completely self-taught is a very individual journey. Like Jim.
You hear that individualism in the way that people are playing and putting things together, and you know that's a really great part of the outcome as well, isn't it? That individual journey can result in a very individual sound if you follow it. So it's like you say, it's a double-edged sword. I remember us saying when we set the course up, you know, this is going to be a huge social experiment because it was very difficult to bring the music into a conservatoire that had got such, you know, I remember in my first year at Trinity being what someone saying to me, you know, this college is 125 years old and you're one.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
So when you were just saying then, because I know that we're in November, you're going to come back and join us and talk to us a lot more about your career and share some of the music and the different things. But you just were saying then about how you and Jim, have, you know, you've talked to Jim a lot about things. And that's something that's very part of you as an inquisitive person. You talk to a lot of people about the music, either because you want to learn and find out, or you went on now to do these interviews. And I just would wonder if you might tell us a bit about why you started this series of interviews, who you've spoken to, and where you're up to with it.
Yeah, thanks for asking about that. Yeah, it's just something that came to me. I reckon it's about maybe 10 years ago now. And I've done so much teaching. You know, now I've probably been in the institution's 30 years teaching, but I was right at the beginning of the Royal Academy of Music course with Graham Collier, a friend who you mentioned, who very bravely set that course up. Yeah. Amazing. So I was there, you know, maybe a couple of years after he'd set it up. And so after all this teaching in these institutions and seeing all this generation of young musicians, I was realizing that most of them had no idea about, also as Graham would say, the jazz continuum. The people who came before them, not the people who just left college 5 years ago that they aspire to be like, but someone who didn't go to college and is 30 or 40 years older than them, that have made an incredible contribution to the music. And I was finding that I was teaching jazz history because I'm really interested in that whole chronology of it and the history of it and how different people learn. And that's what prompted me to do it. And I was thinking, these people are not going to be alive forever. You know, and then I had a cut-off point, maybe I was 50 at the time or something, and I was saying that people have got to be at least 10 years older than me before I interview them, i.e. the generation before me. Yeah. These days, it seems like a generation is 5 years because of the colleges. But for then, if 10 years or even 20 years, for me, is the previous generation. So the first people I started with, I think, were Pete Hurt, saxophone player and composer, who's, he's about 10 years older than me, and Dave Cliff, guitar player. And I only really start with one question, actually, and they're off. I find that most people want to talk, and most of them have not been interviewed in depth. Those who have not been interviewed by a musician. This is the other thing that's, for me, is really important about it. I'm asking the right questions. Well, I'm asking the questions I want to ask, and I'm also going into in depth about it. So I always ask, what's their background? Okay, but in a way, the main question I wanted to ask, and this is the one that hardly anybody answered. I've done 30 interviews, and most people don't answer it really properly, which is very intriguing, is how do you practice? And what did you practice when you were younger? And do you transcribe? The majority of them said, I can't really remember what I practiced. You practice things in all keys? Oh, not really, you know. I also think some of them either don't remember and some of them keep it to themselves. For instance, John Taylor, who I love, piano player, as far as I can work out, he's pretty notorious for not really telling people that much. And this is an interesting thing, giving too much to a student. You know, giving them too much information. That I find is the danger of the colleges, and that's sometimes the problems I have, is that I'm giving people too much. So there's this balance. So he's an example. You know, I've always felt that about John, that he wanted to keep things to himself because he didn't want people to steal his stuff. And there's a whole history of that in the music, of some musicians are like that. Find out for yourself. There's that great thing in the Bill Evans documentary when he's interviewed by his brother. This is called what's that documentary called? It's on YouTube. The Universal Mind of Bill Evans. And his brother, Harry, who's also a musician and music teacher, says, oh, I remember that time, Bill, when you were going to come back to Louisiana and you were coming back to the house, and I was telling all my friends, oh, Bill's coming back to, when he comes back, I'm going to ask him, he's going to show me all these voicings. And he said, you came back and you didn't show me anything at all. You just sat on the sofa the whole time. And Bill said, well, that's because I didn't want to ruin your enjoyment of discovering for yourself. Mm-hmm. So that's an extreme version, you know. Yeah. And John Taylor's probably like that, and Bill maybe was a bit like that. And other people, I'm the opposite of that. I'm just going to give people everything that I know. So I don't know how I got into that, but that's
often they don't answer the question fully or at all.
No, that's right. Yeah, all these people I interviewed. So I think, yeah, Dave Cliff, Pete Hurt were some of the first ones. Kenny Wheeler, probably everyone knows of. I interviewed Kenny before he died. But that was an interesting one because I went to his house and he probably died maybe 1 or 2 years after that. But the other thing about all of them, including him, because he was quite old at the time, their memory was amazing. Everybody's memory was incredible. And I think this is something about playing music and playing an instrument.
Definitely. I mean,
there are studies on this, aren't there? Mm. So everyone out there who's listening, playing it, just keep going to the end, you know, just keep, like Jim's saying, he's just going to keep, and he does so much practice and just keep going all the time. There's something, the connection with the brain and also jazz in particular, I have to say, is a lot about memory. Mm-hmm. You know, remembering forms, remembering sequences, key, you know, patterns, licks, all this stuff. So
absolutely,
there was that in it as well. But back to the interviews, yeah, it's hilarious. Most of them never transcribed or say they didn't. There's people like Jeff Simpkins and Dave Cliff who definitely did because they went the Lenny Tristano route, which basically is how people teach in colleges now. A lot of that importance of transcribing great masters from the past. You know, and
why do you, I mean, it would be nice, I think, for the viewers to understand, why is it called a school, the Tristano School? What is it about him that, what did he do that makes it a school?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know why I said school, but it's probably, it kind of is, people see it like that. So
yeah.
Lenny Tristano, if people don't know, is a piano player from Chicago. He was born 1919. So he was the same, almost the same age as Charlie Parker, but lived a bit longer, into the 70s, I think. Mm. And he was an interesting guy because he's probably one of the first formal jazz teachers. I think all jazz musicians teach to a certain extent very informally. You know, if you just say, come to my gig and listen to me play, that's kind of teaching. But he was very formal, and he'd, you know, specific things that are in college, or certainly in the way I teach, not everybody, but use of the metronome, for instance. Lee Konitz, who studied with Lenny Tristano, went up to John Coltrane and said, do you practice with a metronome? He said, no, never. So some people didn't. Probably Charlie Parker didn't. But with Tristano students, that's one big thing with them, to develop their sense of pulse. But use the metronome very slowly. You know, put it on crotchet equals 70. I mean, I go down to crotchet equals 40. I was speaking to a student the other day and they say they do it on 15.
Wow.
And then I heard somebody did it on 1. So, you know, that's tough, right? That's hardcore. But there are these extreme people around now in the digital
Lots
world.
of pots of tea that you'd be able to make in between each beat there, isn't there?
Exactly. You can go and do loads of things and try and get back in on beat 1 again. But, so go to sleep, put the alarm on, come back. Yeah, but, you know, I don't go that far, but that's one example. The other things are playing things in all keys, being really familiar with chord scales and arpeggios in all keys, all chord types, and then learning solos from Lenny Tristano was very specific about who, you know, Roy Eldridge, I think, Louis Armstrong, Billie Holiday, Charlie Parker, Lester Young, those people. There are probably some others, Bud Powell maybe. He's very specific. So he's narrow in a way, but it's quite a nice narrowness. Mm-hmm. There's a lot to be learned from studying those people. But his process, I think, is really useful. That's the kind of nuts and bolts of the beginning of it. Then the later bit is more about really improvising. And what's interesting about this, and no one needs to be scared about trying to sound like somebody else. At early age, it's really important to do that. All those players who came out of him, particularly Lee Konitz and Warren Marsh, are completely original and unique, yet they copied Lester Young and Charlie Parker very closely. That's what's interesting about it. They're not slaves to that knowledge.
And that I remember, because we met when you were first at the academy with Graham Collier, and I remember even then talking to you about things like sort of line of succession, who'd studied from whom, and how you can sort of go backwards, sort of following who'd been influenced by whom and studied by whom, which is very much what a lot of the piano, you know, what the classical musicians do, don't they? Sort of connecting how the current piano teachers did actually study with the teacher of Mozart or something like that, through that passing on of information. So I'm wondering, with the interviews that you had, do you feel that you yourself have absorbed things? Has it influenced you as a player, all these different interviews? What's the outcome of the interviews for you personally?
About what I've absorbed from the actual interview.
Yeah, what I mean at the end of it, yeah. What do you feel you personally have got out of now? Was it 30 interviews you said you've done?
I must have done 30 by now.
Yeah.
I mean, some people it's more than one. I mean, they want to talk so much. Stan Saltzman did just one question. Half an hour later, I could do another question. I mean, these people have just got brilliant things to say. They're incredibly open. I mean, for me, I haven't analysed it too much, really. You know, it's just a connection with a human being.
Yeah.
You know, two people, it's very intimate. And these people are saying a lot of things. Sometimes they say things they've never said to anybody else. Stan said some things. He said he'd never said this to anybody else. That's pretty amazing, really.
That's incredible.
Incredibly privileged. John Marshall, the wonderful drummer, he did 3 interviews. I mean, that was incredible. He wanted to say so much. Dave Green, the bass player, did 2 or 3. It's amazing. So I haven't analysed it in a way. I suppose I'm just amassing information. And the other thing about it is that these people are dying. So within the last 10 years, quite a few of these people have died I've interviewed.
Yeah. So maybe we can have a conversation about, if you want to take those interviews further and do something with them so that they become part of an archive, maybe we could have a conversation about that, because I'm really keen to support you if you want. I think it would be wonderful for everyone to have access to the interviews. I don't want to break any confidentialities nor trust, but I think at the same time it is really important that we keep their memories alive, not just through hearing them play, but hearing them speak as well. So let's have a follow-up conversation. I'd love to, and that includes how we might integrate it into NYJC's offer, what, you know, our activities and what we do, but also other ways of connecting you with other organisations such as archives, and just to bring it alive. Yeah,
I mean, that sounds great. I just don't know what to do with them, so I would really appreciate that. I mean, one thing is that there's 5 of them on my website that are transcribed.
Brilliant.
But no audio. So I've got the audio. Maybe I'll put the audio up with them. So I've got all the audio, which is easy to just put on YouTube or probably as a podcast. I think ultimately I would like them transcribed. And of course that takes the time. And that's what I need a bit of money for, just to pay a good
Yeah, well, we'll definitely we'll arrange a time to sit down and look at it as a proper project and how we might help you get it up and running so that people can access it. I'm wondering, Jim, who would you like to interview?
Sorry, Jim or me? Did I say that
Jim.
again?
Oh, me.
Yeah,
Oh,
if you had a similar thing, if Martin set it up for you that you could sit in on an interview or even lead the interview, who would you like to add to the series?
oh, you mean someone now?
Yeah,
Someone
yeah, it can.
We can
Brilliant.
Come on.
I thought you meant so who in the, you know, who would you have liked to have interviewed like, apart from the past?
I'm trying not to get too pedantic, really.
Well, I'd actually interview Martin. I think he'd make
brilliant.
Yeah.
It's so nice, Jim.
No, I would. I'd like to sit down and interview Martin. That'd be great. That'd be really good. Mind you, these were they made. So I need to pick someone. What was your rule, Martin?
10. Well, we're just at 10, at least 10 years older.
Yeah, I'd have to think about that. I don't know how old John Clark is. You know, John Clark, the
French horn
player. Yeah, he played with Gil Evans' band.
He probably is that. He's probably in his 70s, isn't he?
Yeah, if he played with Gil Evans, it's likely, isn't it?
Yeah.
So one of the things about this conversation, and I forgot to say at the beginning, I was so excited about it, I forgot to say if people want to post questions. So if there's anyone out there that's thinking, I've got lots of things I'd like to ask, do post them on Facebook. They'll get to us within the next 15 minutes for sure, and they will take priority. So Nick will forward them to us in the chat. So as soon as they come through, we will definitely answer them. But I'm wondering, one of the reasons I put all three of us together is because there's that sort of background of being in different genres, not just being jazz specific, coming from the classical background, going into jazz, self-taught often because of the fact there was no course for us to follow, and having worked in different environments, playing different musics. And I'm wondering now, how do you think it is now for a young musician, sort of age 14 to 18? Do you think things are loosening up? For example, when I was playing oboe at 14, I was told there was absolutely must I not learn anything to do with jazz from the head of the music service. It was banned, forbidden. And so nobody put nothing. So there was definitely this sort of separation. Is it better now, or is there still this sort of compartmentalization, do you think, Martin?
Do you mean in schools?
Yeah, for the youngsters wanting to learn
in
music,
their school.
yeah. And the other way around as well. If there's a school band that plays jazz, are they dissuaded from playing classical? You know, is it more open, or is it still that sort of, there are these genres that you're all playing and you have to stay in one? Like, playing jazz piano ruins your classical technique, things like that were being told to us. And I know some of the youngsters still hear that at school. So do you feel generally it's relaxing a bit more?
I mean, I really can't answer that question because I don't teach in schools anymore, you see. But I feel things are loosening up, but I think it's very individual. You know, you're going to probably get one school where, even if I go back 30, 40 years ago, when I first started teaching, which was in ILIA, in a London Education Authority, and I was a peripatetic teacher in schools. I'd go to one school in what was it, in Camden, and that was really open. That was great. And then I was in another one in Kennington, and that was more the head. It's almost down to the head of music. They seem to have a lot of control, and the Kennington one was very anti-jazz, and the Camden one was very pro anything. And I'm presuming that's low.
The reason I'm asking the individual question is because you're at conservatoire level. I'm wondering if you're seeing it come through. Are the first and second years that you're working with still sort of clinging onto a specific genre that they're playing, or are they kind of is there a bit more entropy and a bit more sort of genre fluidity in their approach to music making?
I see. So
like, can the jazz musicians go off and do stuff with the string orchestra, and can a classical pianist come and play jazz? Maybe you're not
within the college. I don't think there's a lot of it, actually. Right. I think that seems quite separate. I think in their lives, these young people, from what I've always gathered, and this is really important, that they're coming to college and they're doing the stuff what I'm setting them or whatever, and then the jazz life, and then outside they've got their own thing. It's something else. It's, you know, and this, Pat Metheny talks about this in a speech he made to International Association of Jazz Educators. I always like this speech. But one thing he says, that young people have, I don't know what age, between 16 and 24, and have a certain energy that's different from everybody else, right? But also that they need to be in touch with what's going on. Every generation has their own thing. Regardless of whether you're influenced by Charlie Parker or Louis Armstrong, there's something else going on always. And you can see it, you know, and I don't know what music it is or what these people are doing, but there's always something. And that's what I notice, that it's, in a way, it's outside the institution, which actually I think is good.
Absolutely. And to be honest, I've noticed that every year when I have conversations on the summer school, we have the opportunity to talk for 15 minutes, have 15-minute interviews with conversations with each of the youngsters. And one of the things that all of them say is it's just great to be in a week with young musicians their own age, where they can talk obsessively with 45 other youngsters of their own age. They don't get the opportunity to do that. Often they don't know anyone their own age at home that is into the jazz to the level that they are, sort of that intensity. And I remember asking one of them a couple of years ago, because this was every year for 12 years, this was one of the most commonly reported things that they were saying to me in their interviews. And one said that they play with a lot of older musicians. And I said, well, if you're playing with musicians that play to a high level, isn't that enough? You know, what is it about the age that's important? I said, well, I can't talk to any of the older ones about our music. And there's that sort of different bands that they're into, different musicians they're into, that there is that youth culture of audience, that they're listening to certain musicians that they feel the older musicians aren't listening to, and that's what they love sharing as well, getting excited about. You know, I don't think Snarky Pup is talked about half as much as it used to be, for example, but you know, that was a real thing, and I think that's really exciting for them to have that ownership, because that's what's making them stay connected with the music, you know, and it's kind of a rite of passage in a way, isn't it? It's kind of saying, I am a jazz musician and I do love the music. So whether they then go on to discover some of the older generation or outside of the sort of genre, but to see that it's a kind of a commitment to the music, which is really exciting to see, because they haven't had anyone else to talk to about it. There's no one at school often. It's amazing. 83% of the youngsters we work with say they've got no access to playing jazz outside of the things that we're...
Wow. They're special people, these young people.
They are, and it's really great to work with them. And that's the nice thing about all three of us, is that Jim, you came and taught on the summer school when we were in East Anglia. Yep. And Martin, you've taught on a few years. We do a rotation now because some of the tutors are also working in the regions. So it's to make sure that none of the regional work coincides with the summer school, and we're much more themed. So the next theme we were going to have it next year, but because of what's been happening with COVID, we've pushed it back a year. It's going to be third stream and looking at sort of the more orchestral side of things. So that's definitely something. People like Gunter Schuller. Jim, might you talk a little bit about Gunter Schuller and what that was all about? What is the third stream?
Well, the third stream was like a crossover between classical and jazz. Gunter Schuller played with Miles Davis in Birth of the Call, and he was also principal of one of the Metropolitan Opera for many years. So he was he didn't improvise, but he was playing jazz and classical music. So he was playing with the best, you know, in both genres. And so the third stream is about trying to crossover type music where the two things come together.
He was really good friends with John Lewis, who was part of the
the two of them they were partners. The two of them was and in fact, it's interesting that the modern jazz quartet had a very classical, I would call it a classical music approach to how they were seen on stage. Definitely. You know, with their dinner jackets and bow ties. So they seem to be demanding respect on the stage in that way, whether that...
They were. It was very much, you know, because of the fact that there was this like prejudice against jazz musicians, and particularly jazz musicians. They often talked about, black jazz musicians were talked about downtown, and the white musicians were talked about uptown musicians. You know, even though they were not...
to be respected.
And then also the fact that, you know, we were talking about Bill Evans. Bill Evans and Gunter Schuller used to play a lot of piano duets together. He used to play the Ring Cycle, and then, you know, his beautiful book, autobiography, if you get a chance to read it, Gunter Schuller's autobiography, only got up to 1957, and then sadly passed away. But that's a seminal year, because that is the year of where we say the third stream was first recorded and was performed. And then he talks about how he can see evidence of that classical music in Bill Evans's improvisation, and he does some really nice, you know, a bit of an analysis to see that crossover. So I'm wondering if the two of you, if you see evidence of third stream on the jazz scene today. Martin?
I never kind of think of it in that way, really. I think people use strings, don't they? That's common. People use Jim Rattigan. That's an orchestral instrument.
I think also the approach, you know, I think people like, for example, John Hollenbeck, I think you can see that his writing is very heavily influenced by, and it's sort of that sort of letting go of the sort of the 32 bar AABA form and then using that as a vehicle to improvise. There's much more programmatic music, the way that Maria Schneider writes and Christine Jensen. It's much more of that, you know, and the fact that they use the word orchestra rather than big band as well. That's sort of the sound world.
They're writing, it's quite a good point. You know, the thing about jazz, some jazz, you know, AABA form, short form. The way I think about jazz in a lot of ways is short form, which I really like. Mm. And then those people you mentioned, they're long form, really, aren't they? Or through composed as well. And it's a different thing. People do that in small groups as well, of course.
Yeah,
but the ones you've mentioned, we're talking larger ensemble.
Yeah, and it's a bit like comparing Schubert with Brahms or Liszt.
Yeah.
You know, Schubert only takes 3 pages to tell his story. He's a little vignette.
Yeah.
Whereas, you know, Brahms and Liszt stretch out much more, and the abandonment of symphonic form. Yeah, I remember teaching harmony to the piano players, to the pianists at Trinity, because I was head of harmony for the whole course. And then as soon as I became made head of jazz, they thought it was terrible. They didn't understand that we all love harmony from all the different periods, and they thought it was terrible that I was being forced to teach harmony from Palestrina through to Brahms. And it's like, no, that's part of my sound world. So can I please introduce to the stage our program manager, because he's going to explain about the newsletter, the summer school for next year, and also how you can help support the work that we lead. So over to you, Nick.
Absolutely. So if you would like to sign up for our newsletter, we've got a newsletter that goes out every couple of months. You can sign up by visiting nashyouthjazz.co.uk/sign up. If you would like to make a very kind donation to NYJC's bursary fund, it's nationalyouthjazz.co.uk/donate. Pretty easy one there. And then the summer school next year NYJC will be returning to Repton, and will be there from the 22nd of August to the 28th of August, so the last week of August.
And as the newsletters go out, we'll be telling you about how to apply for the summer school, other things that we're doing online and projects, other things that we're doing in person. We'll be doing all the face-to-face after Christmas, and lots of things online. And also, if you would like to donate, because there is still a lot of need for the bursary scheme, whether we're online or whether we're face-to-face. And we've always very committed to making sure that all young musicians from all backgrounds can work with us, and that there is no barrier, and certainly not a financial barrier. I'm wondering, having heard the conversation, Nick, because you studied at Birmingham.
Absolutely.
Was it about 3 years ago?
About 3 years ago, 2017 was my graduation.
You also did the summer school and the short course as well. Was Jim doing the summer school when you were doing the short course in East Anglia? I think he might have been. And
quite possibly, yeah. I think Jim came and talked to us at Birmingham. He had one of the professional development kind of forums that we'd have on a Monday afternoon, and just really insightful. And it was one of the highlights, because it was just so, like, the stories that he had of the industry. It was just really great to know someone in the actual professional world who spoke about music so honestly. I think that's what we really needed to hear.
And when you were doing the summer school, was Martin teaching on either of those that year?
Yes, I do remember Martin playing. I think one of the memories from the summer school was, I think, one of the opening night concerts. And I just remember just hearing Martin and the purity of the sound, and just thinking, wow, okay, this is a lot different from anything I've heard before, like this professionalism and musicianship. So yeah, again, very inspiring.
Well, I'm looking forward to talking more to Martin in November about your career and your creativity, because you do so many different things and you've written so much music. We thought it would be lovely to invite you back. I was really keen to talk about the interviews today, and then to invite you back to talk about your professional life and your creativity, and also a bit more about, you know, your very clear ideas of best practice in jazz education as well, because it's something that you've been very committed to so, as long as I've known you, and definitely put you up there with Simon Purcell as, you know, two of the most important people to have, and Graham Collier, to have shaped the music education scene in Great Britain. So I would like to thank you both very much. One last maybe parting word from both of you about, because I'm sure you'll have seen some of the youngsters you've taught through NYJC and through the conservatoires now out there in the profession, they are really key members of the jazz scene. I'm wondering how it feels to be, you know, have that relationship, seeing students blossom and grow. Jim? Oh
yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, whenever I see students learning, I always feel like I'm learning, you know, at the same time. It's just always a discovery. It's like Martin was talking about Bill Evans. It's discovering as well. It's sort of like the education is a springboard to go and find other things, and you never stop finding new things ever, even at my ripe old age. You never stop.
Brilliant. And Martin, what is it that entices you to stay so engaged in the jazz education scene? Because you've done it for about 3 decades, as you were saying. You know, it's very easy for some people to get jaded and tired, but you're not at all. So what is it about it?
I get excited all the time. I mean, you know, all these months off, it's just really frustrating for me, apart from the non-playing, but actually not seeing young people who are really enthusiastic about the music. And I'm just there at the beginning for them. You know, I've taught a lot of people, but I'm only there at the beginning. I haven't taught them really, you know. And so it's so great to see these people who I've seen on NYJC go through the colleges, and then they're like 5-10 years later almost, and they're leading their own bands. It's amazing. And like Jim says, they supersede me. I mean, I'm learning from them.
And to sort of complete the circle, the two of you, as well as enjoying learning with them, that you book them to be in your projects as well. So you carry on that relationship. I know you both have got ex-students that you work with and carry on playing with.
Yeah, that's true.
So
that's another perk of teaching at college. You can nab them quickly to play with before they get too famous.
Yeah. Too expensive.
Yeah, exactly.
Before they get too expensive.
That does happen, doesn't it?
Well, I think on that note, I would like to thank you both hugely. It's been a real pleasure talking to you both. Right. And I really hope that we can carry on talking and making the series of conversations something that we all keep coming back to being part of. So for now, can I please thank Jim Rattigan?
Thank you for having me. It's great.
And Martin Speake.
Yeah, thank you very much. This is a really great thing you're doing, Izzy. It's great.
Oh, great. I'm really, really chuffed that you're part of it. Next week, we've got 2 alumni joining us. We've got Will Glazer, who is going to come and talk to us, and also Sam Healy. And I try and find a theme for each of the pairings. And with the 2 of them, they both work in duos that are drum plus one other instrument. So it's going to be really nice to see. Both of them have been out on the scene for quite a few years now and really making, you know, waves and fantastic projects. So it's going to be great to talk to them again, because I haven't really spoken to either of them since they went through college. So please tune in, everybody. See you next week. For now, thank you, everybody. Have a really lovely week. Ciao.
Thanks a lot. Ciao.